It is March 6, 2025. It's about 12:15 p.m. And I wanted to follow up on a video, a part two. Part one is in the Poor Bastard series. Uh, it's about being attacked in a space where you have no room to move, and it happens so quick you have no time to think. I kind of got into that, and I had indicated um, that I was an advanced student, of course, and that would be very, very true. And I had given some examples of just instantaneous decisions that you have to make so quick that, I mean, there is no thinking. You just do it because it's a fast situation. I had used accidents or potential accidents with motor vehicles in the last one, but I wanted to just give an example, all right, of, I guess, um, actual in the dojang stuff, right? Unexpected things. Like, where else are you going to practice fighting, being attacked, this, that, the other? I mean, really, in a dojang, right? So, in the part one, I had indicated I had taken a sabbatical from a school that I had been training at 3 years. I had about 1,200 classes under my belt at that school. About 1,000 of those hours were with the actual head instructor, a master, who was running the class. Okay? I never missed a test. I always observed tests anytime they were given, on a Sunday usually. So, I had indicated I was an advanced student. And I had taken that sabbatical September of 1983 and told the master, I said, well, I'm just going to take the semester off. Um, I'll be back next semester. Now, there was a disturbance in the force at the school that summer. I could feel it. And also, too, when you know someone, you can tell if they're upset about something, okay? So, I had no idea that school would be closed within months. I had no idea. Um, there were a lot of higher ranking black belts that, I guess, they needed to grow. I mean, if you're in a place 10 years, I don't know if this is what actually occurred, that they needed to leave for that particular reason, or they just wanted to go out and open up their own school and, self-actualize in that way. And maybe there was no way to work out I have no idea with who they had trained with for 10 years. Okay. Uh, so there was just a definite disturbance, and I'm not going to get into when I went to the school. I had gone through a period of September '83 into January, visiting other schools, training. A week or two there. I trained 2 months at from the same country, but a different federation, and they're slightly a different style. Okay. Um, but when I went to go back to that school in New Haven now, because there was one in North Haven as well, and I trained at both of them. It was a snake-style Chinese. What am I saying? Chinese. Snake-style kung fu school. Right. There was nobody Chinese there. Okay. I of course went in. I participated in the class, met the head instructor. We did some sparring in front of his class, and I didn't go back. But of course, back in those days, all I had was a red rotary phone. There was no radio in my house, no TV. Believe it or not, I had no radio in my car because it broke. And I didn't really stay in touch with people, okay, at all. But I made a couple phone calls, and of course I heard this, I heard that, whatever. Who opened the school here? Who opened the school over there? Who, you know. So I said, oh wow, I'm going to go check the, you know. So I did. So one of those schools, matter of fact, I enjoyed it there, and I grew there because they did things a little different. Um, and they had also affiliated with a different master who they had to drive a couple hours to see, you know, every week. Okay, so something happened. Okay, where they couldn't continue their relationship with the person they trained with for 10 years. So, anyways, I enjoyed that school, and I mean, we did a lot. I mean, it was traditional, but a lot more emphasis on fighting and sparring and stuff like that. And I'm going to give you an example of, again, a mushin, action with no mind, or thought becoming action on an instantaneous, no thought, action. Okay? And it has to do with how you train. And you're not going to think. If you have to think about what you're doing, forget it. I mean, it's like the examples I gave in part one about all of a sudden you're presented with the fact you're going to have an accident, and if you don't make a split second, you don't even have a second, you're going to be in a front end, right? I mean, that's just one example. So you fight how you train, in essence. So I don't know, the head instructor wanted to spar me for some reason. I had never seen him spar anybody before. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, because, you know, the class was sparring and, you know, uh, I didn't expect them to come at me fast and hard. I wasn't expecting it. You know, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to do some spar, you know, because people don't get super, it's a whole nother level. I mean, when you're fighting somebody that's, you know, let's say fighting somebody that's a blue belt, it's different when you're fighting a third degree black belt. All right. Obviously. So he's not the first third that I had sparred with, but he came at me pretty fast. 1, 2, 3, and the sparring segment was over that quick. And on the 3, he was on the ground, okay, and his safety equipment ripped off from my blocks. And of course, he picked it up. He got up. We bowed, but I don't think he was expecting that, to be honest with you. But that's just an example, okay, of action with no mind. Thought action is one. If I had to think about that, well, but I didn't. Just 1, 2, 3, done. Same thing when I was in that office. It was 1, 2, 3, done. But on the 2, I hesitated. Just until I let it go. And I had indicated my hips were locked. When you train, you automatically feel your center and your lower. And I had used the term locked, but it's more like I was coiled, because that's what you're coiled is more a better term. Okay, so it's just, and then to have that turned into you're some kind of a woman-hating woman beater. It's just like holy shit. Okay. And I have another example. Oh yeah, it was the summer of '83. Now there was 2 schools. The school north outside of New Haven, okay, was more of a family, kid, dad, not many moms actually. I don't think we had any moms, but there were a couple women in there too. Where women really, the women that were down in the other school, they'll kick your ass, okay? Right. Yeah, because they've been training a long time, and they're good. So, who walks in? This, he was a 240-pound, 6'2", red belt, and I had never seen him show up at this school. Okay, he trained at the New Haven school, but he wasn't there every class. He'd show up now and then, And And when he'd come up on the floor, everybody, we'd all be up there warming up, and we'd kind of give each other sideward glances because the guy was somewhat flaky and he was a little nutty. And everybody was looking. And so the master put up with it. You know what I mean? It's just, it's a different school. He walked into that one. So I was told, I want you two to spar. Yet everybody in class sit down, right? And I wasn't expecting him to come at me fast, a charging bull. Fast. And I just did a nice little footwork, and he went, whew. I could feel the draft when he went, whew. And all I can hear in the school was, ooh. Yeah, that was it, man. He was told. He's called by name, and he says, you a bad character person? Boom, he was out, kicked him out. Just like that. We never saw him again. But again, that was a no-mind situation. If I had frozen, I don't know, he might have knocked me out into the parking lot. I don't, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's another example. And a matter of fact, I used the same footwork in my kitchen over here. Because sometimes, she gets a little crazy in the kitchen and she's just buzzing around there, and all of a sudden she'll just turn and go, whew, walk the other way, and you're there. And I just made that little footwork move, and she went by, and I was like, she didn't even notice. We almost had a freaking collision, just like, and I was like, where did I do that before? And I remembered it, going all the way back. I said, that was the same thing I did in 1983. Well, I'm going to give you one more example of not thinking. So I went to another school, and of course, I'm familiar with these guys when I'm walking in now. I didn't know anybody before, I was going to, but now that I knew they were going here, going right. So I went to another one, and I walk in, and of course he's familiar with me. I'm familiar with him. I didn't know him. It's not like we spoke, but he had filled in for maybe a week or two one time and ran classes. So I remember him from that. So I walk in, and he had one red belt with him. There's nobody else in the school. I just walk in, and I see him handing something to his. And it was a knife. Obviously, it wasn't real, but 8-incher, right? Yeah. So what did I do? He hands it to him. He turns, and the next thing you know, the blur flies by him, and he hears a crack. His cup, crack. And I land behind him, and I keep running. They both didn't have a chance to blink. And they were like impressed, actually. And it was a flying roundhouse. Not high. A lot of people think flying, oh, you're flying. You could actually fly just a couple feet off the ground. Just, whew. He was like, you can wear a black belt in my school. No. I never did go train in that school, however. So it's but he was a good dude. He really was. So I just had to give those examples. And unless you're in sports, you train. You've experienced these things. I sparred with a 3rd-degree black belt. He was tall, and he wasn't heavy. Okay, this guy had trained. He was a 3rd degree from another state, and he had trained under some famous master. And this guy could jump off his back, like off of one leg, 10 feet. I swear. So when you're looking at somebody doing a side kick on you, and they're doing a skip and a hop, and they just jump off one leg 10 feet, and extend out. I mean, you could be 25, 30 feet from this guy, and he'll be on you in 2 seconds. And you know what? After, I sparred with him that night. I went home. I was like, oh, I got beat up. I didn't get hurt, but holy camole. I was like, I wouldn't want to meet that guy in a freaking alley. Yeah. So that's why it cracks me up when I see people say, well, what did they shoot him for? I mean, he was 20 feet. Are you kidding me? Guy's got a weapon or is a weapon, and then he's not fine. I mean, you want him to get killed? It could happen. Well, why did they shoot him in the leg? Well, why didn't they just tase? I got news for you. If they ever come across somebody who's really, maybe they're totally nuts, or they're totally hyped out, or there's somebody who's bad but they have great martial art technique, they can end up with their, sidekicked and kicked right over their freaking cruiser in a freaking second. Now, unless you see these things, I mean, you just don't know. There was only one other time that I had heard the whole class go make out a big whoa, and it happened. I was training at a school. This is one I trained at for 2 months when I was going to different schools. About 2 months, and they were heavy duty tournament. They were traditional but heavy duty tournament. Okay, I remember fighting one black belt who I seen him fight in tournaments. He's an intense dude, right? So, anyways, we're sparring, and he does a 180 back kick, right? I mean, I see it coming. It was, those things can be super fast, and best I could do was spring on my feet like a cat off the floor and start to motion away on an angle, getting him to miss his target a little, and of course you're tensed. And so he ends up like hitting the board that goes flying across, because I was off the floor, springing, going that direction. I heard everybody go, ooh, and I just went into a roll and got right back up into a fighting stance. Okay, so that's another example of instantaneous split second. I mean, literally, split second. So, yeah, that was an interesting feeling. Flying through the air about 10 feet and then going into a roll. Yeah, that was something. Oh boy. Yeah. Anyways, I just had to talk about this stuff because it's like, yeah, it was something else. And it was something else seeing that Chinese, what am I saying, Chinese? Every time I think of Kung Fu, I go Chinese. Chinese Kung Fu. No. Snake style Kung Fu by an American head instructor. There was no Chinese there. I don't even know if it was snake style, whatever they were doing there. I mean, who knows what they were doing there? I don't know. I mean, if he was training under an actual Chinese master, well, maybe, I don't know if that was the case. I didn't ask that question. I think I was too shocked that there was my last visit at that school would be somebody else's school that I would actually go in it, to train, and it's, huh? Yeah, to summarize a little, because I was kind of all over the place a little. It might have been a little hard to follow. But 81 till September 83, a 3-year period with this school. I trained, and because I was able to train oftentimes twice a week, twice a day, I mean, all right, during like spring breaks or, whenever you had extra time, as a student, I was able, and I was allowed to train at 2 different schools that he had, one tuition. And so I was really, at times, so I was training, when I say I was trained in that 3-year period of time, I did 1,000 hours. That's a given. I just don't know how close it was to 1,100, 1,200 in that area, but certainly I did 1,000 classes in that 3-year period easily. Okay. Um, where did I want to go with this? Yeah. So now that I summarized it a little bit. Oh, I know. I was a green belt, July of '82. Tested in July of '82. Was promoted 3 degrees to high blue. Okay, because when you're tested, you get a blue belt, but then there's 2 additional tests with red stripes, piece of tape on the belt, kind of a thing. Um, so you're talking 3 degrees, and then August, by August of 1983, I was a red belt with 3 stripes. So I had gone up 6 degrees in maybe a 12, 13 month period of time. I was literally a couple months from a black belt test. Okay, literally. All right. Um, so that's where I was when I went on my sabbatical, September of 1983. And for maybe a week or two before, there was definitely a, a disturbance that I could sense. Okay, you could sense, and you just don't know if it's just what it is exactly. I had no clue, as I had mentioned before, that there was some disharmony going on. Okay, um, there. So I went on my way, as I said, and trained and with different schools, and it was just incredible. And I'm going to give you an example because you can appreciate where you came from. Okay, when you or the instructor that you've been training with 3 years when you're out there, and because you've been with a master that length of time, that intensely, you can see pretty clearly if people are doing good or they're not so good. I mean, I'll give you an example. Okay, one school, it was the college campus, as a matter of fact. This was um, they were. I'm not going to say it was a Tang Sudo, Korean style art, Tang Sudo. I'm not going to say the federation because there's different federations. Like you have Tang Sudo Mudakwon. That is that was a serious organization 40, 50 years ago, I guess. Time flies, doesn't it? I mean, yeah, really does. But I'm not going to mention this one because they really weren't a very strong federation. The instructors weren't really impressive. And I'll just give you an example. They actually did a demonstration on campus there. And well, there was this black belt. He's a pretty big dude, pretty big around the waist too. I mean, he was definitely carrying extra weight. And he was going to do a suspended break. Okay, meaning you hold a board suspended, and because it's not held, all right, you need a better speed and snap. You better have speed and snap, or that board's not breaking. Okay. Um, and the interesting thing is, you had people sitting to the sides, holding it, so you had like that, right? Not behind. So if the board goes and it hits them in the chest, who knows, right? I mean, if it doesn't break. So, he hits it, bam, right? That thing goes flying across the gym. I mean, I was like, would you want to get hit by that? Not really, but that's not really a martial art punch. That's not. It wasn't good technique, obviously. It was a failure, right? Now, I'll give you an example. One of the demonstrations I witnessed, the master demonstrated being able to break basically 3 targets, one kiap, one hand, right hand fist. What he did is he had uh, people that were experienced holding boards, number one, okay? And they were black belts, all of them. Holding the piece like this, two piece boards out in front like this. So you had, and there was half circle, and he was like that with, and One key out, pop, 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 and they all dropped to the floor. Two boards, two boards, two boards. They didn't swing up and hit him in the face, hit him in the. They went boom. Now that's a master. Okay? So that's the level. This guy was no bullshit. So I'm going to tell you a story about. Remember I told you about the scoop? The scoop? Yeah, I got all the scoop. When I found out that when I went to the school and it was a snake style kung fu school, of course I made a couple calls. And of course, I got a lot of different info and whatever stories, and you know what? If it's something I didn't see directly, I'm usually I'm not going to get into discussion of different things or whatever it is, but I'm going to talk about one because even if it's hearsay, obviously. I mean, I wasn't there, but it sounds just like uh, the master, something he would have done, and basically there was a problem in that somebody had taken a um, trophy from the display case in front of the school. Now, this was black belt class. Okay, so it's a picture. You got 20 black belts in class, and the master comes out, and I'm not gonna, you know, use a real name here. I'll just say John Smith. And this is exactly something I've seen him do this type of stuff. So he calls out his name, and he goes, John Smith, or something like that. Like, trophy is missing. Where is the trophy? Right? Everybody's silent in the school, right? And so what he does is he takes a step. This time he goes a step towards the black belt in question, a third degree. One step. John Smith, where is trophy? And of course, he took a step forward, and you're talking 19 black belts would go one step back. Of course, John Smith there, okay? he was just standing there, And so he comes another foot closer. After, he goes another foot closer, another step. John Smith, where is the trophy? Right? And so that's how, I'm not, so that's kind of how you're getting the picture here, okay? That was obviously his last day. And, he had gone and opened up another school. And, it was a very well-run school, a well-run school, matter of fact. As you might expect, since he trained 10 years with the master, was a third degree. Yeah, he did a pretty good job. As you might expect. So that 3-year period of time, from September 81 to September 83, was a very, very positive experience, is all I can say. And it leaves you for an appreciation, okay, of especially Asian martial artists, okay. I know over the years, I mean, Americans have been training quite a bit, and in the 70s, it was kind of a new thing. Masters were coming over in the 60s and 70s here and there, and people were beginning to learn how to actually fight. Because I'll tell you, when you look at the older movies, in the 40s, the 50s, they couldn't fight. You remember the time period where they actually had some. If it was a movie and there was a Chinese character, they were grabbing. They weren't getting an Asian actor. They were getting somebody to making them up to look Chinese, kind of a thing. When you go back to that period of time and look at people couldn't fight worth a damn. Well, it's a whole different story now, isn't it? Really is. I mean, seriously, and that's because of all the arts that came over and that were shared with students. But I'm going to tell you, culturally leaves you for with an appreciation. This person that I trained with for 3 years was no BS. It was had been a major at one time, um, training military police, training special ops in of those times, or the equivalent of Marines or special ops um, in combat, hand to hand. Oxford educated, international lawyer. I mean, this guy was no bullshit. Okay, period. Not one bit of bullshit in this man at all. So it was an honor, actually, to be able to have trained for 3 years under this individual. And I was just sorry that it didn't work out. I would have loved, you know what, getting a black belt from a seventh degree, the real deal now, the real deal. This guy's, you know, once you get into the fifth, sixth, seventh, it's very, very, I've seen fifth degrees that were absolutely incredible. Okay, so maybe a seventh is a little more political. Once you get into seventh, eighth, ninth, it's more of a political ranking in a system. There might be a slight difference between a seventh and a fifth, very, very imperceptible. Only a master would be able to see that. Um, but it was definitely an honor. And you know what? It was a very positive thing to have invested my time in. Seriously. But I got news for you. A black belt from some third degree on some street corner somewhere that might be training, with whatever, or not training with whoever. It's a whole different game when you've got a certain signature on a black belt, right? Certificate that you get. Whole different. Now that would be something, right? I was that close. Talk about bad luck. And there was, and I really should have pursued. I didn't appreciate it enough back then. So wherever he was, I needed to pursue it. If I had to drive to Danbury, for example, or you know, um, just continue training wherever his presence was, I needed to do that. But year after year goes by, and next thing you know, it's like, hey, you're not even training anymore, and other things take precedence or your attention. You got to call this short. I'm starting to experience contortion. My martial art days, first of all, they were over a long time. Okay, already. I mean, let's face it. But my fascia, my core, my fascial meridians, the main fascial meridians, um, your lateral lines on both sides that are really include the glutes. Um, every main fascial meridian, my entire body. When I get spasms of interconnected chains, uh, fascial meridian spasm as a whole, okay, as a whole, from head to toe, or complexes of tissue. And what was really something when I was reviewing the anatomy of the core and your whole abdominal, and it was really led me right into the study of the physiology of the Cheop. And I'm like, wow, am I back on the, except I'm not training, but I'm still on the trail of study. That would be something somebody would study if they were still in the martial arts. But this is about pursuing better functionality and slowing down disease progression, right? Pathogenesis. I was very, very fortunate to have studied under a master. Now, when I saw um, a Dr. Robert Schleip, okay? Having a conversation for an hour with a manual therapist of this book, a matter of fact. Thomas W. Myers is the author, but Anatomy Trains. Every martial artist should have this book. Let me tell you, oh my God, I could have used this when I was training. Because all we do is fascia training. I should say all we do, but a lot of what we do is fascia training. As a matter of fact, a lot of the techniques utilized involves fascia or fascia development and the flow of ki through fascia as well. So now he didn't come out, the master, and talk about by name fascia, but in order to advance in martial arts, you definitely had to have the development of your fascia. And he explained it without naming it. So when I saw these two, here I am, years later, and I'm sitting there watching these two, and it clicked, boom. And I had already figured out that I wasn't having a bone problem, it was a tissue problem. I had complained of musculoskeletal disease all the way back in 2018. I had been complaining about all kinds of symptomology going back to 2015, late 2015, and heavily, okay, for the last several years, you know, the whole thing. And 2022, I'm walking in front of the TV. I just installed a webcam there, and I start getting videos for piriformis disease, which, you know, when you look, because it had noticed my backside, and when I looked at my backside, and I was like, oh my God, I've lost my whole backside, okay? And my glutes gone, and all the tissue internally was totally pissed off. I mean, totally. I mean, you take your fingers and you just dig it in underneath your ilium here, just on toward to the inside, just a quarter. It would set everything off. I go into complete like spastic city, okay? And even getting my prostrate squeezed because it's surrounded by muscle. So everything was just. So I didn't even begin to go on the path that I'm on currently until I saw that interview and connected it to what I've been taught and realized it's all about fascia. And that's when Mike ended up on the mats. It was really difficult. So martial arts has saved myself in ways I would have never imagined, like being able to literally work on this disease problem I have, this body-wide connective tissue disease that involves my fascial organ. It impacts, if it's elevated, motor, proprioception in a hardcore way, and of course, interconnector problems get really bad. I start experiencing, again, full chains going into spasm, fascial meridians going into spasm, or complexes. And you haven't, when I was extremely, I mean extremely, because I had been going month after month after month without really not enough sleep, with basically sitting here day after day after day, and my body was totally out there. It was incredibly symptomatic, like so many symptoms going on. Who knew? If I had actually been able to be treated by a doctor, who would even know? Me walking in, they'd be like, well, how are we going to figure this out? Because you got to back it out. You got to back it. You got to calm everything down, and you got to get right down to the nitty gritty. What is the actual problem here? Okay? It's kind of like, I was always using a physical therapy cane. I used to bring it everywhere with me. And it was just dealing with the tip of the iceberg of the symptomology. It was only a very slight, it was only a brief alleviation of only some of what was going on. But I had that thing, and don't use it anymore. I use it to stretch my fascial meridians, especially your superficial back lines and your laterals. And so you're laying on your back, and now I've got video of it. When you're laying on the floor and you're putting stress on your lateral line, the ones that run this way, head to toe. I think that's longitudinal, right? This way, or laterally, this way. I guess this way. Right, straight down, and you put stress on that. And you stretch it. You point your toes or your heel. You point that heel or your toes, and you point your fingers, and you stretch, and then you contract that. You contract it. That whole chain of interconnected, your fascial meridian. And where do you feel the pull? You don't feel it in your fingertips, do you? You don't feel it in your. Where do you feel it the most strongly? What exact spot in that? And the interesting thing is, this is your pelvis. Your legs come in. This is your upper body. You feel it here, and you feel it there. You elongate, you feel it. You contract. You elongate, you contract. And you know what they keep trying to talk about? Oh, you have peripheral neuropathy, but it's impossible for him. It must be mental illness. I mean, you know how many people, going back 7, 8 years ago, right, when this all started? Peripheral neuropathy. Where all your periphery, your hands, your feet. Now that's nerve. Fascia. And for hands, and they were killing me. I used to say, if I walked on my hands, it'd be the same as my feet. And I was like walking around like eggshells. It was brutal going back just to the refrigerator or going to take a piss, anything. And this is when I first had the bad reaction going back in 2015, going into 16. And my hands killed me. Everything. Right? Feet, hands. It's because my center, right here, and everything connecting into it, was super tight. So by the time you get to your hands and your feet, once you get symptomology in your wrist, your hands, in other words, you get with the flexion, right? You get pain. Everything's tight. You start getting, everything's getting tight and compressed. If you're that far along, you are highly elevated, and everything is extremely shortened in your body. Everything's being compressed, and your tissue between bony points, okay, that I work all the time, like between your rib cage and your hips. That's a good example, right? What happens if that contracts? Well, you can't sit up straight, kind of in a slump. You look like you're slouching because you can't sit up straight because your superficial back line is shortened. So you're like this. And plus, you have an imbalance. Your front lines, they're shortened too, but they're stronger and they're pulling you down. You haven't lived when you can't breathe because everything is contracting at one time attached to your rib cage. Okay, I've had that happen. Okay. No, you haven't. You haven't lived until something like that's happened. So this has been quite a long discussion Um, I really need to cut this short. I could talk a whole lot longer, obviously, about the experiences between 1981 and 1984 that I've been discussing. Um, a very, very positive. Nothing like the practice of discipline. Keeps you out of a lot of trouble, really does. So it was a real trip, being out around, like I had explained, at different schools. Um, and then, of course, um, I did come across some of my former classmates, of course, that when they had no school, they were showing up at other schools. Um, some they'd already been at, and I was told, or they belonged to the actual school, but I didn't see them training during the time I was there. Um, I maintained my rank of red belt 3 degrees at other schools. I had a 5th degree tell me that a particular student that I trained with, well, he took him down from a blue to a Marine. He told me that when he told me I could keep my rank after he saw me obviously train with his class and spar all his reds and blacks. He said, "You can keep your rank." I was a much better martial artist after I had left um, the school because you're being exposed, obviously, to other things. You're doing things differently, and you grow because now you're in a larger pot, so to speak. Also, too, it's a confidence factor as well, and experience as well. You're getting your feet wet. Okay, when you go to this school and you're sparring, every you go to that school, you're sparring every. You're over here, you spar an instructor. You over here, you spar a 3rd degree. Over, you know, some schools are tournament. They fight pretty intensely. You know, um, but fundamental, um, technique oriented, traditional, okay, is always the best type of school to go to. There was a school that I just didn't even bother going to, okay, that was well known, and it's because they were just strict tournament fighting school, and that's all they did was it was not a well, it was not tempered by the presence of a master. Okay, number one. And I said by presence, I mean affiliated, associated with, training with the head instructor of that school with a master, an Asian. And it has to do with attitude and approach. So that school, I didn't even bother going to, okay? Um, it was good sharing this. And is there anything else I wanted to add real quick? It's just so much to discuss. I mean, unless I actually sat down, did an outline, did all that stuff, but we're not going to go there, okay?